We've been talking about the last line in the last verse in the text. It starts out about making contact with a qualified spiritual mentor. So I've been talking a little bit about the qualities and then forming a relationship with a qualified spiritual mentor and so on. And so how the texts really recommend that we look at our teacher's positive qualities after we've accepted somebody as our teacher. And the reason for that is that then that encourages us in the Dharma. And if we really think about it, the teacher, the role that our teachers play in our life is the same role as the Buddha played in the life of his disciples. Yeah, it's no different. And so in terms of learning the teachings, receiving the precepts, all those different things that we need in order to progress along the path, it all comes via our spiritual mentors. And so when you see that's the role somebody plays in our life, then that person becomes very important and meaningful in our life. And it really behooves us and is in our benefit to regard that person in a positive light, because you could only imagine what would happen at the time of the Buddha, and it did happen sometimes. Disciples started criticizing the Buddha and slandering him and so on. Then what happens to their minds? Yeah, they dig themselves in a ditch that they can't get out of because all they see is negativity around them. And there was the Buddha teaching them the path, and all they said was, no, he doesn't have psychic powers, and he says there's no self, and he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's too ascetic, or he's not ascetic enough, and and just criticizing. And you can see that at the time of the Buddha, when that happened, it just really harmed those people's own practice, and they wound up giving up, And so seeing that our teacher plays the same role in our life as the Buddha plays in the life of his disciples, then let's learn from that and not make the same mistake as those few disciples who criticized the Buddha, but really followed the example of the disciples who succeeded in their training and succeeded in gaining awakening, who regarded their teacher in a positive light. Also, when we think about the kindness of our teacher, it's something really quite remarkable. Because when you consider that we weren't born at the time of the Buddha, and that all there are the texts left, who is it that makes the connection between us and the texts? Yeah, it's our spiritual mentors. If you just pick up a text and start reading it, how much are you going to understand? You'll understand something, but to really plumb into the depths of it and to really get an experience of what the text is saying as a living tradition that's really something to be practiced and that is transformative in our lives, that can't come just from merely reading a text. It has to come through this kind of lineage of teachers going back to the time of the Buddha, of people who have practiced, and that gives you the energy to practice and the example and the inspiration. So when you think about that, then you see that the kindness of our spiritual mentors is something that's really tremendous. And if that doesn't ring a bell with you, then just try imagining that you didn't have a live spiritual mentor and all you had was books. Yeah. And then where are you going to go from there? Yeah. You can get some inspiration and knowledge from books, but who are you going to ask your questions to? And who is going to tap you on the shoulder and remind you of your comportment when you're messing off? And and who is going to help you understand the proper meaning that the Buddha was trying to get across, because the Buddha said sometimes different things to different people according to their predispositions, and we don't know who he said what to or why he said what, just by reading something ourselves. And then especially about making something practical in our society where, you know, which is very, very different from the society at the time of the Buddha, very similar in some regards, very different in other regards. You know, how are we going to know how to update some of these things so that we can practice them in our lives right now? Yeah. For example, you know, when the Buddha just talked about not stealing, not lying, you know, well, there was an income tax at that time. So what do you know, how do you do your income tax when you think the government is using the money for a purpose that you don't agree with? If you don't pay your income tax, is that stealing? Is that lying? You know, there's all these kinds of issues that come up now that didn't come up at that time. And how are we to regard these kinds of things? Yeah, at the time of the Buddha, women were regarded as the property of men. That is certainly not the case today. So how are we to understand some of the things that were said? You know? So we really need the guidance of a teacher to help us through some of these kinds of things. So when we see that, we really see that the teacher plays the same role in our lives as the Buddha played in his disciples, and we really see the kindness of the teacher for helping us learn things, you know, and going out of their way to put up with us sometimes. And when I look in the case of my own teachers, I mean, I met my teachers in the West, and so they traveled halfway around the world to a country where, you know, people don't know how to respect them. You know, back in their own community, they received a lot of respect. They came here, we were a bunch of hippies, and just kind of, you know, slided into the meditation hall and, you know, didn't bow, didn't put our hands together. In the break time, we're listening to rock music, taking dope, you know, and they put up with us and taught us, you know, and they could have been really teaching some people who were, you know, maybe much better, you know, and more receptive. So, you know, and then they had to learn another language and, you know, and deal with all of our customs and so on and so forth. And yet they still came and taught us, and I just see that, and it's just amazing kindness, you know, what they did. So, you know, very good to ponder these kinds of things, because it really helps us to have a positive outlook and to appreciate our teachers. And when we appreciate our teachers, then we clearly study the teachings they give us better. We take the teachings more seriously, you know, and put them into practice more diligently. So we're the ones who come out best from having that positive attitude. It's not that our teachers need us to respect them.